Welcome to the Side Action Podcast, the sports gambling show that covers everything in the world of sports betting from A through Z. We'll cover the four major sports, as well as anything and everything in between worth some action, and will increase the size of your bankroll. And here we go.
Welcome to Side Action, episode 21 of season 4. My name is Jim Weggars, aka Weggs. You can follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and on Instagram.
And I'm Steve Roberts, aka Action. You can follow me on Twitter at 31sroberts.
Follow the podcast on Side Action Pod on Twitter. So Action, obviously a big Wildcard weekend, which we'll get into. You've obviously had some other success in golf. I had a great weekend betting. I mean, I 3-0 this weekend. All my picks hit, and overall, I still am alive in the ATS. We kind of communicated about that. Schwa and I, the other guy, we basically made the same picks the whole time. So we'll have to change it up this week if we want to win something.
No drama, huh? Every game, I know you texted me, you looked, and you guys had the exact same side.
Stupid Rams. I was gonna flip to the Rams, and I was like, ugh, but I can't. I hate the Rams, like Stafford, but. Ultimately we'll talk about that. It was the right side, but it looks like you were, cashing some tickets in this golf match, huh?
Yeah, I think I told you I was one of my goals, I guess you would call it, for the year. Gambling goal is to get more into golf, and
right.
I stumbled across this website called datagolf.com that has a whole boatload of information and strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, and driving off the tee. And I've been kind of like crunching some numbers, and they offer some little bit of modeling too to give you some predictions. And so I picked some golfers last week in the Sony Open, and had Russell Henley, who jumped out to the 18-hole lead and really had like a 3-stroke lead going into the last 9 holes. And unfortunately, he had to battle Matsuyama going down the stretch, who I also had a bet on in the tournament. So ultimately, they went into a playoff, and Henley would have been a slightly better payday, so I was cheering for him. And then on the 18th hole, they replayed it in the playoff. Matsuyama, par 5, drilled a 270-yard 3-wood to like 3 feet from the pin for eagle, and Henley had no chance. So it was a exciting finish.
That's awesome. Well, good for you cashing tickets. I've heard the VSiN guys are all over golf all the time. So, and we will, Side Action listeners, a little preview. There's a little golf late at the end of this episode, so stick to it. Well, let's jump into the wild card weekend. It was an interesting weekend. Overall, the books got crushed because the favorites just dominated. The favorites on the weekend were 5-1. Against the spread, so that means dogs are 1-5, and then the road dogs were 1-5 because all the home teams were the favorites as well in these matchups. The lone dog was San Francisco, and we'll talk about them in a minute, but they were the only one that came through, and we obviously were on them as well. So, and then the unders came in. I was a little surprised in a couple of the games, but the unders came in 4-2. So I guess that's probably typical for the playoffs in general, but it seemed like some of the matchups just didn't, and some of them were close. They were very close. The Raiders 2-yard line or whatever what they got there, they stayed under. But and in general, the spread didn't matter, as we've kind of talked about a lot of the season. None of the games were really affected by the spread directly. If you picked the side, you would have been able to win outright. So I don't know. Besides getting the highs and lows, any other impressions from Wildcard weekend?
Yeah, boring AF. I can't tell you that I was focused on any of the 6 games that were played over the weekend, save for maybe the Niners. We had other things going on around the house and was probably more focused on basketball, to be honest with you.
Right. I mean, the Raiders Cincinnati game was decent. It came down to the end. It was kind of one of those, I just felt like the Bengals didn't want to take over, we'll talk about that a little bit, but in general, you're right. It was kind of drama free, and I missed that Niners game as we were communicating. I was playing volleyball, and I came out and I was checking the score, and you're like, oh no, you missed it. It was like that was the only one that had some drama. Everything else was kind of a one-sided affair. So with the highs, I mean, we start off with the Bills. The Bills were, they were on a mission. I mean, not just against the Patriots. They've been playing great since that Tampa game. in the second half, and the Bills just kind of destroyed the Patriots. We kind of liked the Patriots with the points because it was, +4 was kind of a weird number, but since they played that first game, they haven't punted action.
Right.
The Bills played 2 games without punting against the Patriots. In this game, they played a perfect game where they scored on TDs in every single drive, except for the kneel downs at the end of the half of the game. And Josh Allen played incredibly, but I really like how Devin Singletary was running the ball too.
Yeah, they're finally getting the run game going. I know you've been harping on the Bills all year about their lack of a running attack, and Singletary scored 2 touchdowns, and as you mentioned, the Pats just couldn't stop them. I think that the Patriots defense is a little bit over the hill, and certainly they'll be looking to replace some of those pieces going into next year.
Yeah, definitely. They look slow. I mean, the Bills look so much faster at every position in that game. So, it was the right side. I mean, we obviously, in the end, the Bills are advancing, and unfortunately they draw the Chiefs, and we'll talk about them in a minute. The other high was the Bengals. They won their first playoff game since 1990. Well, it's the 1991 season. So I believe Boomer Esiason might have been quarterback back then. This is like I was in high school then. I mean, I can't believe it. All those years with Marvin Lewis, they lost all those games, and they almost blew it. I mean, Jesus, Carr had a chance at the end of that game to at least tie the game, or at least either or go for 2 and win it. But they had a chance to force overtime. But the Bengals looked great in the first half and played really conservative to win that game outright against the Raiders and also cover the number.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, I don't know if you heard, Wegs, that was before text messages were invented. That was like the running joke I must have seen 100 times in social media over the weekend. But Joe Burrow, I was impressed with his first playoff start. He really doesn't seem like the moment gets to him at all. He definitely has the pedigree coming out of LSU and going on that magnificent national championship run. So it'll be interesting to see if the offense can sustain this week going up against Tennessee, who's been pretty good defensively the last several weeks after they lost King Henry.
Were you impressed with Joe Burrow's glasses after the game? He had kind of those violet colored glasses. Rainmaker, Zach Suter said he's going to sport those at O'Donovan's after a softball game. I dared him to do it. So those were not, I don't know what those were from, the 60s? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Something that John Lennon would wear, I think, but definitely not a fan of those glasses.
Okay, good enough. The last high was the Niners. We had talked about this game. We like the Niners in this game, and they had the big road win against Dallas. A couple stories in this game. One of them, well, first of all, the Niners controlled this game right away. They went down and scored the opening touchdown and really didn't look back. I mean, Dallas only scored 7 points through 3 quarters. The Niners kind of opened the door in the fourth quarter. Jimmy G had a bad interception. They went for 4th down. I think they kind of got jobbed on the spot on the 3rd down, and then, of course, had to false start. So they opened the door, and then Dallas, I mean, this is one of the things with Dallas. We talked about this. I love their metrics. I love their team, but their coaching sucks. And McCarthy, and, obviously I'm a little bit surprised that they ran the ball on that last play where they just kind of ran out of time and they blamed the refs. But in the end, it was a stupid decision to run the draw, and they couldn't set the ball in time. And Kellen Moore's up for a lot of coaching jobs, but I mean, his offense couldn't get it done against that San Francisco defense.
Yeah, that's true. I read and heard a lot about the last play, obviously, and it sounds like McCarthy had some say in that too. So He strikes again. But I think the bigger story was what happened in the previous 3 quarters, 0.9 fourth quarter, where they just couldn't do anything against San Francisco. The points that they scored late were really benefited by those turnovers. And I think you really had to question the game plan. I know that they passed way heavier than they ran after both Zeke and Pollard had such big seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think they'll fire McCarthy, but they should. I mean, I've been on board with that even since last year. I thought that he was garbage, but that talent, it's a shame. I mean, in the end, I think the Niners are a really good football team, but Dallas should have probably showed better, at least in this game. On the lows, I had to put the Cardinals, Kingsbury, and Murray. I mean, in general, this team, look, I wanted the Cardinals to win. I picked them in my team. I stayed away from the betting. I was off on this one, but they didn't ready to play. The game plan was garbage. Kingsbury has been terrible down the stretch. You probably saw the tweet where basically he's lost 5 or 6, 4 or 5, or 6 or 7 in each of the last 5 seasons as a head coach. Obviously, he doesn't do adjustments, and they looked terrible the first 3-4 drives, and then Murray had the terrible play in the end zone that kind of killed it. I mean, the game was in control by the Rams, but that pick six from the 2-yard line when he did that crazy underhand throw, that ended the game. And it's kind of a shame. They had a really good season, but, up through like 12 games.
Yeah, it really is a shame. After the start, media was talking about Kingsbury as a potential Coach of the Year candidate, and they definitely faltered down the stretch. I got to be honest, after the pick six, I turned it off, so I didn't really watch the second half at all. But they just didn't show up. Even with J.J. Watt, there was some discussion about how Watt returning could change the defense a little bit, and that didn't come to fruition either.
And that was my handicap why I picked them in the ATS, because I thought, well, the Rams haven't been playing great, and neither team played great. And then you figure, well, the defense is a little bit better for the Cardinals, but it didn't really matter. The defense didn't play well, but when you're not, it needed to be a tennis match, and in the end, when you're not going to score with the Rams, you're just going to be in trouble. But Cam Akers did look pretty good for the Rams. We could talk about that in a minute. Next one was the Eagles' offensive game plan. Oh, my God. I mean, look, Nick Sirianni, I don't think he's a great coach. We talked about him in the beginning of the year where his opening press conference could have been the worst opening press conference of a coach ever. But this, high school type offense for the Eagles against this Bucs revitalized defense, I don't know what they were doing. I mean, it was atrocious early. They had a couple of plays where they probably could have done better. Obviously, Hurts, missed Smith at one point at the end of the half, and the terrible play by the punt. But I just think the offensive game plan wasn't the right one against this Bucs defense.
Yeah, clearly they weren't able to run the ball, and they had to rely on Hurts' arm, and that was a recipe for disaster, obviously.
Right. And they did not cover. It was another miss in the ATS.
I was kind of hoping that Gardner Minshew would get some run out in the second half, but that never happened either.
It was interesting, I would put that on Twitter, and some of the guys, it was Warren Sharp or one of those guys, was like really defending Hurts being in the game, that he's a better quarterback. I'm like, when you're throwing the ball exclusively, I don't think he is. I think Minshew's better. Now, when he's going to run the ball, sure. But it was clear that he wasn't going to really – the plan of attack wasn't working in terms of him running sweeps and stuff. So why not get a guy who's just going to zing it and really be more accurate with the throws? Because he had some pretty bad throws that there was other ones that could have been picked in that game, not just the ones that they got away from him.
Yep.
The last low I had was the officiating. I just thought overall, and I know that there's been a lot in the media talking about grading of officials, but we had the play in the Bengals game, which we didn't mention, the Burrow touchdown, that he clearly was in bounds when he threw the ball, and the whistle blew, and then people stopped. They still called it a touchdown. There were plays like that all over every single game. The officiating was just bad, and it felt like a preseason, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know that there's any solution to that. To be honest, I don't really see that changing at all. It's just something as bettors that we have to deal with, and it's not really anything that you can incorporate into a handicap either. You just have to ride with the highs and the lows when it comes to the officials. Right.
I mean, usually the better team's going to win, but I mean, some of the ones kind of maybe affected some totals, or some sides anyway, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the divisional round action. All I do for the playoff index, I don't necessarily recalculate it every week like I did during the regular season. I just put where people were at the end of, using the regular season stats to come up with the index. But you've got some pretty good teams left. Obviously, Buffalo at the top of the heap. They've been there all year. And then the Bucs at number 2, the Chiefs, Packers. Then you've got Rams, 49ers. You've got Bengals over the Titans. I mean, the numbers are close on the back 4. But, some of these matchups are really tight action when I look at the index, which makes sense to the better teams. But certain things like we'll talk about, the Bills, are markedly better than the Chiefs, and the Bucs are actually markedly better, than their opponent, the Rams. But injuries do play into all this, so we'll have to talk about it. I know you haven't redone DVOA, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was looking. I don't think that they updated. It's the exact same order, and I would have thought that at least the Patriots would have slid down a little bit. So
sure.
I don't recall if they incorporate postseason numbers into DVOA, but looking back at yours, the thing that jumps out at me right at the top is how much higher the Bills are ahead of the Chiefs, and that may be a preview of your pick to come later. but kind of that strikes me as a major difference, 4 points there.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I don't incorporate the direct, 4 points equals 4 points of spread, but yeah, we'll talk about that in the handicap. I mean, the Bills have been the best team, and we've talked about that. They beat up on really bad teams throughout the season and then, lost close ones. So we'll see. The Chiefs did rise up fast, late in the season, and we can discuss that in the handicap. Well, let's talk about the injuries. I mean, because I think this is more impactful in the playoffs maybe because now we're just talking about people going all in and really – not that they don't during the regular season. I think that when you have injuries at certain positions like defensive line, offensive line, you're going to expose them really badly in the playoffs. The Bengals defensive line are the first one. This Larry Ogunjobi is out. He's their stud defensive tackle that left in the game. And the Raiders was averaging 6 yards a rush, and they didn't rush that many times. They should have rushed more. And I don't see any new news on Mike Daniels here, but there's also Trey Hendrickson, who had a concussion, a defensive end. He was a stud for them all season. He's questionable in the Titan game. These are really key injuries for them.
Yeah, definitely are. I did see that Hendrickson practiced today with full practice. I don't know if that means he cleared protocol. I would imagine he has to practice. So that would definitely be a big get back for them. But Mike Daniels is not looking good from what I'm reading, and obviously the loss of Ogunjobi is going to hurt on the inside as well. Those two guys are really their stout run defenders, and definitely not a good recipe as Tennessee comes to town.
That's right. Kind of jumped to last with that game. You got the return of Derrick Henry. He had full contact practice, so it looked like he's a go. You're right that he's anticipated 20 carries this week, so they're going to be formidable for that Kansas State defense.
Yeah, I would hear might get a couple of carries as well, just the change of pace back in there. And so I have very high expectations for the Titans' run game this weekend.
Yeah, me too. Another big one is San Francisco. This is my, Super Bowl runner-up pick here. You've got Fred Warner, the linebacker, because he's fine. But Bosa is, we got to monitor him. He had a concussion as well. He was knocked out of the game. We know that it's not Joey, right? It's Nick. But he's obviously critical for the pass rush against Aaron Rodgers. But the other one is Jimmy G. And it's funny because Jimmy G ended up playing the game, but apparently he had a shoulder sprain going in the game. That's what they said. And you're saying there's rumors swirling around that he might not be available, which is critical. Sorry, the mine plus 5.5 action. But yeah, if he doesn't play, there's no chance with Trey Lance, right?
The spread I think would move. That we'll have to talk about what that difference might be. But I'm been hearing rumors all week on media that I listen to that there's some insiders who are suggesting that Jimmy G might actually be closer to questionable than actually looking to play. Practice report from Tuesday shows light practice. I don't see any data from today, Wednesday, but I personally suspect that this is just Shanahan trying to play more games. Historically, he always pulls the BS, and I have pretty high expectations that it's going to be Jimmy G. And you've seen here in the last day or two that the line has moved up to 6, so I don't know if that is directly related to that or if it's just folks lining up to bet the Packers.
Yeah, I think that people are lining up to bet the Packers right now. I think obviously the defensive injuries. Now, usually you said that the limits go up on Wednesday or Thursday. When do they go up? Because this game's a Saturday night game.
No, that's true. I don't know if they change them based on the game date, but typically the larger sports books that cater to the pros will raise limits on Thursday.
Okay, so it's more like I kind of want to see where this line goes tomorrow, even though I'm already invested. But I just kind of from my ATS pick, in the pool. I love the matchup here. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry, guys. The last one is the Bucs. I think this is a really important injury for right tackle who's questioned with an ankle. He was in the game, got hurt, they brought him back, and Ryan Kerrigan was running all over him. They had to get him out of the game again. And in fact, I actually thought the Eagles played pretty decent in the second half of that game without Wirfs. I think of injury with Jensen, although he wasn't on the injury report this week. So that's important because the Rams front four, obviously with Donald in the middle, and Von Miller and Foote on the outside, they're going to get after Brady in the first matchup. So you need a healthy line for those.
Yeah, definitely. We saw in the second half that, as you mentioned, the Eagles started to get some pressure on Tom Brady. And given his lack of weapons on the outside, ultimately that's going to add up and bring an offense that's already decreasing down a little bit more. So I did see that Wirfs was a DNP on Wednesday today at practice, and he and Jensen are certainly two to monitor.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's roll into the handicaps here for the divisional round. We do have some other stuff to cover today or this week on the onside action. So the Saturday games line up like this. You've got the Bengals at the Titans in the first game, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. The Titans open as a 3-point favorite at home. It's up to 3.5 right now, 47-point total. Look, even with the Bengals, the injuries aside, I think the Bengals definitely the injuries are really going to help our handicap for the Titans. But I think for the Titans and the way they played all season, getting people healthy, being a home favorite at 3 or 3.5 is obviously the hook. But I'm all over the Titans in this one, action. I think the Bengals were happy to win their game. And as good as Joe Burrow's been, unless they kind of pull some magic, I think they could get kind of pummeled by a team that's ready. They've done what they needed to do to get to the regular season to get the 1 seed, and the Titans are just going to run it down their throat.
Yeah, I agree. I was thankful that I saw a tweet from Adam Chernoff, I think, like midway through the second half on Sunday, as it looked like Cincinnati was going to win the game. FanDuel posted odds on these two AFC matchups.
Right.
And I quickly jumped on the Titans -2.5,
Oh, good for you.
assuming that they were going to be down some of those defensive linemen. And now we're sitting at 3.5. I would certainly tell the listeners that there's no rush to jump in and bet the Titans at 3.5. At this point, the difference between 3.5 and 4 is minimal. You might as well hold out and see if it trends back to 3.
Right. Yeah, so it's obviously, I think the way that they've set up the slate, this makes sense. I'm not saying that the Bengals can't win this game. They certainly can. We've seen them beat really good opponents, including the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago. But, we'll see. I think that, one of the things I noted from the Raiders game, I don't think Zach Taylor was very aggressive when he needed to be. Maybe he'll be more aggressive this week, and that's what he needs to do to win this game. He needs to unleash Burrow, and Chase and the gang and just go for it, because they really were conservative, especially in the second half in that game against the Raiders.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to. You're going against the number 1 seed in the AFC, so definitely need to throw out all the stops here. And speaking of the total, 47, looks like there's some over money that is hitting the market, so it looks like bettors are expecting a higher scoring game here.
What are you thinking on the total? You think it'll stay under?
I don't know. I had definitely would lean to the over at 47. I think that especially with the Titans getting some of their weapons back, presumably A.J. Brown is going to be even healthier than he has been. There's opportunity for lots of points in this one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on board with that. Makes sense. Okay, so the next game is, a big game for my predictions, but, let's see. I really got to wait on this one. If you're betting, maybe the Packers, you can bet them now. But 49ers are going to the Packers. It's 8:15 Eastern. Green Bay opened as a 5-point favorite. Wish you got that if you're a Green Bay backer. It's up to 6 right now. 47.5-point total. We talked about Nick Bosa and Jimmy G's shoulder. I still like San Francisco in this game. I think that they match up really well against Green Bay. But I will say that you're probably going to get more points if you like the 49ers. I think it's probably going to tick up to 6.5. At some point, maybe even 7, especially depending on obviously Jimmy G's out, then it could get higher. And I like the under. I know that a lot of people think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but if the Niners can control the game, I think they're going to run the clock. I mean, it's just going to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field.
Yeah, I agree, and it looks like there is sharp money on that total under as of now. Another spread total 47 currently. But I'm with you. Obviously the Jimmy G question mark gives me some pause, because I don't believe that Trey Lance he's probably a 2.5 to 3 point drop off at this point in his career, and I think it will be extremely interesting to see if Jimmy G actually does get ruled out, to see where this number settles. Probably crash through the touchdown and land at 8.5 or 9.
Sure.
But like I said, I have an expectation that Jimmy will play, and I'm with you. I think that the Packers' run defense sucks, and I don't think it. I know it because they're 28th ranked against the run this year, and we've seen a whole slew of teams just run all over them. And now we're seeing Deebo Samuel get more carries, and Eli Mitchell, the rookie running back, has been great too. So I like the Niners. I like them on the money line too. I think the Packers are going to lose.
I think so too. Now, what if Lance plays? Do you think that, not the money line at that point, but do you think it's a good value at the 10 or 9.5 if it gets Lance in the game?
No, I would definitely be passing on the side if Trey Lance is out there. I think that lends some more value to the under. Obviously, you're probably going to see a move down on the total as well if it's Lance, but Um, I think that 45-44 range would be good with Lance under center.
Right. And if you're a Packer backer, it doesn't mean we're giving you advice here, but Green Bay's got to come out and they got to score 14 points in the first quarter and get San Francisco to throw the ball. Because Jimmy G, not just with the injury, he's going to turn the ball over. He did it last week. If you can, it's really about game script in this game. Who's going to control the game? Now, I do think the defensive line for San Francisco is really good, but the secondary is not so good. And we saw that even in the first matchup against these teams. They couldn't cover Devontae Adams, and it was shameful at the end of the game. Couldn't catch two 30-yard passes to get him in field goal range to win. So obviously, that's a factor, but I think that San Francisco is a really good football team, and so hopefully we get to see the best play at the same time on Saturday night. Okay, well, let's go into the Sunday night games. You've got the Rams against the Bucs. This is a rematch again. This is 3 o'clock Eastern time. Tampa opened as a 3-point favorite, and it's really right around that 3 points. Is that what you're seeing? Actually, I'm seeing that at Rivers too. Oh, it's 2.5 now. 2.5
Really?
at Rivers. Yeah, so that's a good number for the Bucs. But so 48.5 point total, and that's what I'm seeing at Rivers right now. Let's see, there's extra juice, so I just
minus 118.
So look, this is an interesting situation. Again, Wirf's not playing. The backup wasn't good from what I saw. But again, I don't know. I don't know what I can say about the Rams. Monday night was not an accurate representation because I think the Cardinals were bad. They just were bad. I don't think if they played anybody, they would have played well. 3 points at home. I mean, I'm kind of the Bucs here, action. I don't like to be. I don't like, we picked the Rams early in the season. I thought this was a great matchup for them.
Yeah.
But we know how Stafford's been, and I got to be honest with you. I know that the Eagles' offense is not like the Rams, but that defense looked really good on Sunday. So I'm inclined to, that 2.5. I jump on 2.5 for the Bucs in this one. Look, I don't like Tom Brady. I don't want him to win another title, but I'm just saying I think that I'd be on the Bucs here.
Yeah, I don't really have strong conviction on this game, but I can tell you that I have some concern if indeed Wirfs is out or limited because, the Rams defensive line can rush the passer.
Oh yeah.
And who's the defensive end that they got out of Denver? His name is escaping me right now. Von Miller. And Von Miller and company are going to get after Tom Brady and put some pressure on him. So I would probably lean to the Rams here, but I'm probably not going to be betting on this game.
Okay. Well, it probably is a good opportunity, to be honest with you, Action, to tease the Rams up, right, and get it to 8.5, 9, plus 8.5, 9, and then depending on where you want to maybe either do it another leg in a different game. What do you think about the total in this game? Originally I was thinking, this will probably be an over game just because, both offenses are really good, but the defenses can show out too. I really think that Tampa, the way they're going to win if they get back to the Super Bowl, it's going to be on defense. And, Tom obviously has been carving up everybody no matter who he has out there at receiver. But 48.5, I mean, I'd probably, if you were to do the teaser thing, I'd probably tease the Bucs up and the total down and do the over is the way I would do it.
Yeah. We saw last week the total in Tampa crash, but that was largely due to this huge windstorm that was supposedly coming through.
Right.
And looks like this week they're expecting 61 degrees and clear in Tampa for the game. And in the previous meeting, they did put up 58 points combined. So we've seen these two teams eclipse this total in really the last several meetings. Last year it was 27-24. And so I would agree. I think that there's probably going to be some points here.
Right. Okay, the last game of the weekend, the marquee game, is the Bills at the Chiefs. This is 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I should be back from Tampa by then, by the way. So Kansas City opened as a 2-point favorite. Actually, I didn't update this. I think it's 1.5 at Rivers right now.
It is.
Yeah,
1.5.
Two. I've seen 1.5 too. So it's around 2 or 1.5 where Kansas City's the favorite at home. The total's at 55. Is that accurate? Yeah, 54.5, 55. Look, I've already put my chips on the table. I think Buffalo's going to win this football game. I know that I'm getting sucked in. Like last week, and I wrote in my article, it's all over the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, he's my guy, but there's something about this Bills team action, and I know that they didn't play. There's a couple times they didn't cover, but they are running all cylinders. And that defense played incredible. And granted, it's a lesser quarterback. I know you're Mac Jones. I'm sorry, I don't insult him, but he didn't play well. So this could be a high-scoring shooting affair. But I mean, the Bills have a better defense. They have a better offense. I mean, I don't know. Am I missing something? I mean, they can pass the ball a little better than the Bills, but these teams are, I mean, it's not just the index. I think the Bills are a better football team.
Yeah, but they are going on the road to Kansas City,
Yep.
and I know that they went to Kansas City previously this season and pasted them by 18 points in the first meeting with the very similar spread, I might add. I think, oh no, scratch that. It closed Buffalo -2.5, it looks like. Is that right? It must have been.
Yeah.
No. Was it? No, sorry. It was Kansas City -2.5 in the first game.
It's the same spread.
But the difference is that was when Kansas City was in their losing streak early on in the season. Remember, they couldn't cover a game. And I think the defense has obviously gotten much better since then. Certainly not as high as the Bills are, but I like the Chiefs in this one. I think that they're the team with the pedigree and that they are going to rise up and beat the Bills. They've got revenge on their minds after the first game in the season as well. So I think we're on opposite sides on this one.
Yeah, we are. I mean, look, I think the winner of this game is in the Super Bowl. I do believe that. They might actually win the Super Bowl, winner of this game. I think that, as much as I love the Titans story and everything, I just kind of see either of these teams going to Tennessee and beating them. And in the Super Bowl, we'll see if they play the Bucs or whoever. But these are two really good teams. Josh Allen is getting to that point, and this is his chance. This is his big shot. Now, maybe he, sorry to use the term, blew his wad last week because he had a perfect game pretty much. But I'm just excited, man. I'm excited to watch this football game. So it's really great. So, okay, we don't have to go to the picks, but I think it sounds like, in general, we're a little bit different on the Bills Chiefs. Maybe similar. We need to hear some information about the Bucs. You're still on the Niners with me and then the Titans. So it sounds like Saturday are easier picks for us than Sunday.
Yeah.
All right, well, Side Action fans, we are transitioning. Now we're going into hoop season, college hoops specifically. And, what we do on this podcast, kind of transition slowly, we'll still talk about NFL until it's over. Start integrating our college basketball picks, and it's our second love. And one of the things we like to talk about right away is the Action Index. So we have the WEGS Index in the NFL, and we've got the Action Index in college hoops. And, a couple of years ago, this guy was making a fortune on Texas Tech. So let's follow his advice when it comes to action. You want to walk us through what the Action Index is and, how it's derived?
Yeah, it's Ken Palm based. I think everyone who handicaps college hoops probably knows who Ken Palm is and pay the $20 for the subscription. Definitely worth it. But I take Ken's data and really kind of own in on the offense adjusted efficiency and the defensive adjusted efficiency. And it basically gives you a metric of how many points each team will score on a per possession basis. And then you can use that data and multiply it by their average pace to come up with a total. And what I do is I actually tweak some of those numbers to add in some rebounding adjustment, turnovers, as well as field goal shooting percentage. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that rebounding is a very important factor, for example, in college basketball. And
Sure.
so I weight that a little bit more than some of the other metrics to kind of tweak Ken's numbers. And it results in a little bit of differences sometimes and sometimes not so much.
Right. And for those that, are new to our podcast or for this year and listen to football, Ken Palm is like, he's the guru, right? And you can look at his website and check all the stuff. There's a lot of information there, but what Action's been able to do is kind of distill that, and it really kind of gets predictive. We can use his Ken Palm stuff for point spreads and everything, but more importantly, Action and what I try to do is pick the horses. I'm trying to pick the horses as it comes to the tournament and who I really trust and who I don't trust. And I agree with you. Action rebounding is important, not just in college and any level of basketball. I would hope it's important. So who you got? Go ahead.
I was just going to add, historically, the national championships have always been in the top 20 defensively and offensively in Ken Palm's ratings. So definitely something to look after if you're going after a national championship pick.
That's right. I always look at the combined, score of those. When you see those teams that are like number one in offense, but 145th in defense, I mean, as good as they may be in Ken Palm, I got to stay away from them, come tournament time and when they play certain opponents. So
that's Purdue, I think.
Right. Well, let's kind of, looking at actions list, I think most of these teams are all covered below here. What I thought we'd do is kind of go league by league and talk about the teams that are kind of exciting right now. And obviously this will change a little bit, but usually what happens at this stage of the year, because they've already been playing for a couple months, we're kind of late to the party here in the podcast, but some of these leagues are traditionally really good, and that may or may not translate to tournament success, but it also can translate into betting success. So let's go over some of these big leagues action. Let's go with the Big 12, which I'm not saying it's the best league this year, but it traditionally is a really competitive league, and I watched some games last night for the first time and was really impressed. So we know that Baylor is one of the top teams in your index, and in general, they had a tough week last week. They're returning a couple of guys from their championship team from last year in Flagler and Mayer. But what do you like about this Baylor team?
Well, I mean, defensively, I think you got to start there when you're talking about Baylor, because last year, the national championship team, and again this season, was a really strong defensive team. They really like to suppress their opponents, and they historically are excellent defensive rebounding as well. So certainly I'm a defensive guy, and they fit the bill from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, they're well coached. I think that Baylor over the last couple of years, and this year's no exception, in college basketball, guard play is really important. Size is really important, as you talked about with rebounding, but late game situations, free throw shooting, turnovers, guards, and they always have good guards at Baylor. So the rest of the league, you've got Kansas. I watched them last night. Obviously got the former Loyola coach Moser is over in Oklahoma. They probably should have won that game. They blew it against Kansas. It was a great game. But Kansas is a good team. They've got lots of size, and they've got a guy named Agbaji, who's the leading scorer in the Big 12, at least he was going into last night, on the perimeter. So they're kind of back. I will tell you, our guy Prime looks a lot like Bill Self, I think. It looks like Bill Self is healthier this year. He's not as stressed out after all that investigation. His face is not as red. And it looks like his team is playing a lot better than they were last year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, preseason, I think Kansas was probably the number one in terms of the futures odds boards. So certainly the preseason favorite to win the national championship. And Agbaji is definitely a beast inside. Their defense is not quite as good as Baylor, though. I think mid-30s. Mm-hmm. So something to keep in mind, but definitely an excellent offense.
The other two teams I wanted to highlight, I mentioned Oklahoma, but they're good, but they'll probably be like a 8 or 9 seed type team or 10 seed, is Texas. Texas, obviously they had a coaching change. You had Shaka Smart there at one time. Now you've got Chris Beard going from Tech to Texas. So he brings that brand of defense, and he's probably brought some of his, maybe not his guys from Texas Tech, but he got his transfers in. I saw they lost a tough one last night, but as you mentioned, this team plays, pretty good defense. They're in the top 15 in defense. They're decent scoring the ball too. And the other team is Texas Tech, his former team, where Mark Adams is the coach, his former assistant, and they're third on the defensive side. So these are teams that when you come, when you're going to play these other teams, you better bring your lunch pail. You better start playing really good on offense. Otherwise, you're going to get beat up.
Yeah, Texas Tech in particular is one team that I've been targeting a lot this season for unders. The second ranked defensively, I guess you have third on here, but right. They play a very slow pace as well. So you see a lot of low scoring games in their contests.
All right. And in general, top to bottom, this league, you've got teams like Kansas State, Oklahoma State that, they can win at any given night. I think winning on the road in the Big 12 is really challenging. So as we talk going forward in the season, when you see a road situation, it's hard to win on the road. So you obviously want to get those points if you're a home dog, in the Big 12. Let's talk about our favorite, Big Ten. Big Ten country. Actually, still in Big Ten country. Everybody knows he hasn't worn the sweatshirt in a minute, but the Purdue sweatshirt over here in Detroit for action. Purdue is, they should be the best team in the Big Ten, even though Wisconsin's playing great. You got your two twin towers out there. I might have misspelled the eBay and Williams, and then the number one offense in America. Why don't you tell us about your team?
eBay, I like it. Zach Edey is Canadian-born Ontario guy, and he stands at 7'4", and he is every bit of 7'4", so much so that when he makes a move in the paint, he's always elbowing his opponents, and he often gets calls for high elbows, but he's just tall. I don't know what to say. But Purdue this season is not the historic Matt Painter team, because typically you see Purdue defensively is in the top 10 of every season, but this year they've sloughed off quite a bit, down in the 60s in defensive rating, but they've made up for it with their offense. Number one rated per KenPom. They're scoring almost 1.25 points for every possession, and that really comes down to the efficiency of both Edey and Travion Williams on the inside, because both of them are very high in terms of field goal percentage.
And what I understand is they don't play them together necessarily. They kind of throw Edey and Williams and just kind of wear down the other big man. So then by the end of the game, they're just destroying them inside. And that kind of happened against Kofi Coburn the other night. Took 2 overtimes. But and one general comment about the Big Ten. Last year, you had 10 teams make the tournament. They were really deep. I don't feel like the Big Ten is as deep this year. Last year, like a Rutgers team, you had teams that were pretty good. It seems like there's a little bit more top heavy than past years, but maybe better. The other team I just mentioned was Wisconsin. I watched the game last night against Northwestern. They won 7 straight. They've beaten some top teams. This Johnny Davis, I guess, is Player of the Year, favorite right now. He's their guard. They've beaten teams like Houston and Purdue already. What do you see in this Wisconsin Badger team?
Hatred. Wisconsin is my kryptonite, man. I don't know what to say. They're good. I will admit that, and it really comes down to Johnny Davis. He is otherworldly. I think he is in the top 10 in terms of KenPom's player ratings. He can score pretty much at will from anywhere on the court, and that gives them an element that this Wisconsin team hasn't had in several years.
Right.
And certainly with a player like that, they can make a run in March.
Yeah, they'll be a tough team. They're well coached, of course. Their guard is always a good coach. But I agree, they have a guy in late situations that can score, without screens or set plays. So we'll see how that works. He looked like he broke his nose last night. We'll see if he, missed a game. Or, he got hit pretty good across the nose. He came right back in the game with stuff in his nose. The guy was a tough guy. A couple other teams, Illinois, I mentioned that already. They were really good last year. They're not as deep as they were a year ago, but Kofi's a big guy in the middle. Frazier and Crivello are really good on the outside. They have, a team that can really play. I do like them, of course. Ohio State is good. E.J. Liddell is a really good basketball player, probably in that top 5, top 10 player in the country kind of situation. He can score on any given night. Are there any other teams that you like in the Big Ten right now?
Yeah, I think Michigan State deserves to be highlighted as well. They have their typical, hard-nosed defensive team, not, top 25 defense and mediocre offense as well. But I think this is one of Izzo's really, when you use the word team, this is probably one of the teams that he's ever had, because there isn't really one individual standout in this group, but they play really well together.
Right. Michigan's a little down this year, but they can surprise here and there. Well, let's jump to the league that kind of surprised us last year. At least I was pumping them up. Ashton kept putting me down for trying to pump them up, and then he ends up riding them to player championship. But the Pac-12, this is a team that that's the League of Champions. I don't know if you knew that. But they've got 3 really good teams that they made some noise last year in the tournament. Not just these 3 teams; they had several teams play well. But Arizona has a really talented team. They've got this 6'11" sophomore, Azulis Tubulis, or whatever his name is. He's supposed to be a super athletic dude. They've got a new coach in Tommy Lloyd, who's an old Gonzaga assistant. This team, I guess, I've heard a lot of pundits say that this team could win the championship, which is weird. We haven't heard a Pac-12 team win in a while. I haven't been able to see them yet, but they're a really talented team, and it's exciting to see the Pac-12 actually play good in the regular season and maybe get a decent seed.
Yeah, I mean, we described earlier the resume that you need to win a championship, and Arizona fits it. 14th ranked offensively and 9th on defense. And this is definitely a team that can make a run in March. I would definitely put them in the top 5 in terms of odds to win the title.
Right. Some other teams here, last year USC was my squad. They lose Evan Mobley to the NBA, the talented now, he's a rookie in the league. But his brother's on there with Isaiah Mobley. They still have a very good team. They're not quite as good as they were last year, but they're kind of in that, 28 to 35 range in both offense and defense, so they're really good. And also UCLA, this is Action's team with Johnny Juzang. They still return all their team. They have the same team as last year, essentially. And they've got, all these guys. Mick Cronin's got them playing. They're not playing as well, but they're still in the top 20 in both offense and defense. So do you like either of these teams?
No. I've been looking to find spots to fade UCLA this year. I think that they're the odds makers and the public are going off that run last year, and they're just overrated, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, certainly it's the same team, like you mentioned. They could get hot again, and I certainly wouldn't put down Juzang's scoring ability. But much like most seasons, I'm probably going to be down on the Pac-12 going into March. We'll see if they surprise me again.
Right. I think the next deepest league besides the Big 12 is the SEC, especially when you look at the matchups and what they can do. Kentucky's back. It's always great to have Kentucky back. You may not like Coach Cal, but honestly, I respect him. I think he brings a lot to the table as a coach in his recruiting. But when they're good, it's always more fun in the SEC. And he's got a really good team of young and older players. He's got Ty Washington as a Frosh guard, but he's got some good forwards from transfers and some holdovers. So they're a really good team. You see Auburn's up there as well. They're a super good team from the metrics, like top 15 in both. And then your guy, Nate Oates, the coach of Alabama. I mean, these guys just keep coming in LSU and Tennessee. So you've got 5 excellent teams in this. And I'm not even talking about Mississippi State and Ole Miss. They're all in the top 40 of KenPom. So some good teams there.
Yeah, definitely a really deep league. My pick of this league has got to be Auburn, though. I mean, I've been incredibly impressed with their defense, and Jabari Smith as their leader is an excellent player. I'm kind of down on Alabama, despite their run last season. It's a team that I've been looking to fade game in and game out. I think it's another team that I've got on my overrated list.
Okay, good to know. A few other leagues, and we go through all these leagues. ACC, I think it's shallow again. It's interesting. Duke has this really good super freshman, and this Paolo Banchero, 6'10". He's like a point guard, but he's 6'10". He's a great passer. They've got 3 other guys on the freshman side. They're really good. Coach K's last season, and Shire's going to take over next year. I watched them last night. It was funny because I haven't watched barely any college basketball. I'm like, oh, Duke's taking Florida State. Florida State always beats Duke. And what happened? They beat them again in overtime. And Leonard Hamilton's team, who I love always, they're not as good as they've been. But so I'm not saying it's the same old Duke, but it's one of these things that as good as Duke is, they kind of get manhandled when they go down to Florida State. The other teams in the ACC, you've got North Carolina, of course. They're always pretty good, and Virginia Tech. But it's not the old ACC of like 4 or 5 years ago, is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, this is probably the most surprising conference, I would say. For those of you who may not follow college basketball closely, you would just expect the ACC to be good. And that's just not the case this year. Realistically, you could be looking at 1 or 2 teams from the ACC that make the tournament.
I know. Last big league is the Big East. It looks like Nova's back, which is exciting. Colin Gillespie got hurt late in the year last year, hurt their chances. But they played pretty good in the tournament. If you remember, they surprised some teams. But Colin Gillespie is back as a super senior, 5th-year senior, which is kind of a COVID adjustment we can talk about as the season goes on. So they're playing really good basketball. And then you've got other really guard-heavy teams like UConn, Xavier, and Seton Hall that kind of round out the Big East. Are you big on the Big East, or are you still kind of fading them as you do the ACC?
No, I mean, there's some teams in the Big East that I think could make some surprises. I like Providence, too. They've got a good team this year, kind of middle of the pack in both offensive and defensive efficiency metrics. And, there's some teams that are on my often fade list, too. Butler is one team in particular in this league that I look to fade often, as well as Creighton. They have been playing very poor lately as well.
Right. They've been good in the past. A couple of the teams to keep in mind, we always talk about the Zags. So out of the Western Conference, they've got the Zags are playing, West Coast Conference. They've got Drew Timme back. The Zags are always at the top. They're number one again in AP and also in KenPom again. So, same old thing. They almost had it last year for their big title. But there's some really other good teams in this conference. And BYU's good, St. Mary's, even University of San Francisco is pretty good. So they may steal some bids from like an ACC or a Big East this year.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Typically, you just see one or two bids out of this league, and Gonzaga is not quite their same formidable self. I know right now they're number one at KenPom, but they've already dropped 2 games this season to Duke and Alabama, and I think they'll probably lose another one here in conference play as well.
Right. The last team that obviously made a kind of historic run to the Final Four was Houston out of the American Athletic Conference. I mean, they're really good. I think they have. Sampson's a really good coach. They're returning Sasser and White from last year's team. They lose your guy, Giroux. Al Giroux, is that his name? Was his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really good.
Dejan Giroux.
Dejan Giroux, sorry. Al Giroux's a singer. But they don't have a lot of competition in this league, so they're going to be really good. They're going to have a really good record, maybe a gaudy record, but we have to kind of be wary of that. But they've played outside their conference. Obviously, we mentioned they lost to Wisconsin, but this team always plays really good defense, and they're in the top 16 in both categories in KenPom right now.
Yeah, and typically I look to Houston in years past as an under team because of their extremely strong defense, but so far this season, their scoring has been surprising me quite a bit. They're 8th ranked in adjusted offense this season, which is quite a bit different than in years past.
Exactly. Well, so typically what we'll do for the college basketball thing, we'll highlight big games. We'll go over Actions Index first and then highlight big games. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at these, but I threw out a few this week. A lot of them are Big Ten and, big conference games. But Purdue is going to Indiana. That's your obviously alma mater going to Indiana. This is on the 20th, which is, I guess that's tomorrow night, Thursday night. Purdue is a 3.5-point favorite in Indiana. Do you like the Boilers?
Well, I like the Boilers. I'm a fan, but I'm probably going to pass on the side, despite the fact that I must point out Purdue has won 9 games in a row against Indiana, which is an incredible streak if you can think about it that way, and 6 of those have been covers against the spread. But this game, I'm going to be targeting the total. I already bet it, 145. It opened up at here tonight, and I think that this is definitely an under game. Indiana actually has a really good defense this year. They're 11th ranked defensive efficiency, and despite Purdue's stellar offense and kind of mediocre defense, I think that this is a game that's going to be played at more of an Indiana pace. And on Monday, when Purdue visited Illinois, the total closed at 147, and in that game we had an Illinois team with a much better offense and a poorer defense. So I think this number is just a bit too high, and I played under 145.
Gotcha. One of the things we should say is because college basketball is a little different than like pro football, they're only going to put the spread out a day and a half or so ahead of the scheduled game. So oftentimes we have to report out kind of a projected spread and where we still only tape once a week. And so we kind of have to project what we think the line's going to be based on KenPom and some of Actions metrics. The next game we have on the slate is Michigan State at Wisconsin. This is, we never talked about this. We didn't talk about college football this year. We know that Action loves the Friday night action. This is a Friday night action game. Michigan State at Wisconsin. Wisconsin would be a 3-point favorite here against Sparty on Friday night. Are any action against the Badgers, your nemesis?
I alluded to it earlier, and I like betting against Wisconsin, but I'm not sure that this is the spot to do it. they're typically really tough in Madison, and I'm projecting about the same. Actually, I have Michigan State a little bit rated higher than Wisconsin, so probably a little bit of value on the Spartans, but it's just really tough to play road teams in the Big Ten.
It is. It is. Yeah, I mean, they're almost dead even in KenPom, right? They're right there together, so depends on how you look at it. Okay, good to know. We've got some SEC matchups. I think Saturday has some really good SEC matchups if you want to watch college basketball before the football games. Kentucky goes to Auburn. We talked about Auburn and how good they are on Saturday. And, I'm a little partial to Kentucky because I think, obviously big game Cal, gets his team going. But Auburn has been really tough at home in general this year and, Bruce Pearl and all that. So any idea about the Wildcats going to visit the Tigers?
Yeah, actually, I think that there's some value on Kentucky as projected road underdogs here. KenPom has Auburn favored by 3. And typically, I think you alluded to this, the books like to take KenPom's numbers and just post them and see what happens.
Right.
So I actually have Kentucky as a little bit berated in this game, 3 points better than the Auburn Tigers. And I think that there's some value if you're catching 3 on the road.
Yeah, I think so too. They're a really good basketball team. They can score the ball, even though Auburn's really good against, in general in defense. But I think, if you look at actions ratings with Kentucky and their rebounding, they're always a good rebounding team. The other SEC team game on Saturday is LSU at Tennessee. These are really good teams as well, as I mentioned. As I mentioned, this is kind of weird. LSU is kind of inverted. In years past, they've been a really good offensive team and not a great defensive team. They're number 1 in defense this year, actually, and 105th in offense. That's weird, isn't it? But I just kind of feel like Tennessee, this is going to be a defensive battle. I would think the under would be the play here. I don't know what the total is, but.
Nailed it. Look at you. Yeah, KenPom projecting 136, and I've seen LSU play a couple times this year. Their defense is awesome.
Right.
And on the other side, you have a Tennessee team that also likes to play defense. They're 5th ranked in their own right. So KenPom projecting 136. I think this is definitely an under game.
Okay. 2 more games for college basketball this week. We've got Michigan State, Sparty in both games this week. At Illinois this time. This is a Tuesday matchup on the 25th. You talked about, Illinois obviously can do both things. They can score the basketball very well, and Sparty typically, maybe not quite as good. I like Illinois at home when they play. I don't know what your projected spread is here, but I would probably take Illinois at home.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up here. Tuesday looks like KenPom is showing Illinois -6.
Okay.
So it's probably a good number. My metrics show that Illinois will be about 5-point favorite on a neutral. Okay. So factor in home court there. You're probably looking at 8, a couple points of value on the Illini for sure.
Nice. The last game is the ones we talked about, the Pac-12 face-off on Tuesday night. And, when you watch these college basketball games, you got to stay up late. Sometimes they start at 9 or 10. Arizona's going to UCLA. It sounds like you would be on the Arizona side, not knowing the spread right now, given your feeling of UCLA. And I'd probably be on board with that. I think this team is really good, road or home.
Yeah. It looks like KenPom is showing a UCLA 1-point victory in this one. So short road dog here for Arizona. And again, similarly, my numbers have Arizona as 4 points better than UCLA. So looking like, and realistically, you might even get a couple more points of value given the odds makers' propensity to shade towards the Bruins.
Right, for sure. Well, there you go. So we close out college basketball this week. Next week, a little bit more, maybe, or about the same, maybe less on the details of the conferences, just talk about the games. So we'll go forward. We talked last week about throwing some more sports at you, and Action's going to give it to you. We've got the American Express tournament in the PGA. It sounds like he's done some handicapping, so let me know what you're thinking for this weekend.
Yeah, I know that you like to golf, Wags, and I'm hoping I can convert you into a golf bettor as well.
Sure. If I can win.
But, I like to mix it up. Historically, I've not really been interested in betting what they call outrights, which are picking a golfer to win a tournament. But I've more recently come around to the realization that you could actually find some value in some cases where you're betting on a golfer that might have longer odds to win the tournament than they really should be. Mm-hmm. And so I've been doing that a little bit more this season, obviously reducing a bet size tremendously. if you're betting on longer odds. But then the other way that you can bet golf is to play matchups where the books will pit one golfer against another and then just set a number against it, much like a baseball game might be lined. So this week is the third tournament in the newly minted season in 2022. The first two were in Hawaii, and this weekend they're back on the mainland in La Quinta, California. And this one is kind of an interesting setup because there's 3 courses that are in play, and there's a rotation format. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, each of the golfers will play 1 round at each of the 3 courses. And then after the first 54 holes, they're actually going to make the cut, which is atypical because normally they do it after the first 2 rounds. And so 2 of the courses are really kind of very low-end courses for the tour. And so it's an expectation that this is going to be quite the birdie fest. And there isn't really a lot of rough or hazards on either side, so driving accuracy comes less into play. And it looks like that there's going to be a lot of low scores in this one, projecting in the 20s or so. So you're really looking to target players that are really good around the green and that are really good putters, because especially on tour, when you take out driving accuracy, then really those are the important factors.
Sure.
So the other thing about this tournament is historically there has been some really long shots that have won. You don't typically see any of the favorites come through. Although John Rahm is participating this week, he is the world's #1 and appropriately priced at like $650. Certainly not something that I'm interested in betting on when it comes to golf. So I've targeted a couple of longer shots this week. Taylor Gooch at 29-1 won the RSM Classic in the last tournament in the fall, and he's a really great putter as well. So bet him. And then I've got a couple of longer shots too that I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of money on. Jonathan Vegas at 75-1, Taylor Moore at 90-1, and Harold Varner at 120-1. So I'm hoping to cash a big ticket this week, Wags.
I mean Vegas. Johnny Vegas.
Yeah,
come on, Johnny Vegas. Let me ask you this though, Action. So when you get to Sunday and the cut's made and all these guys are in it, or maybe 2 of them in it, do you look to hedge at that point? Is there a way to hedge your bet at that point with either a matchup, or how do you do it? How do you approach it?
That's a phenomenal question. It's tough when you bet outrights because any number of golfers could potentially come victorious on Sunday. But if you have a player who's at or near the top, typically those matchups will come out in the exact order that their playing partners might be. So if you have a player like Taylor Moore at 90-1 who happens to be in the last group, you could just attack the matchup against his opponent and potentially come out on that one. Gotcha.
It looks like you have another matchup that you're looking besides those right guys.
Yeah, one matchup I do like this week is going against Brian Harman. He's a player who played last week in the Sony Open and did not fare well over the weekend. Did not have the putter with him, and I think that he is going to be into some trouble this weekend. So I played Luke List -120 over Brian Harman.
Gotcha. And so basically, if Harman doesn't make the cut and List does, you win your bet, right?
That's right. Yeah. Or if List just has to beat him by 1 stroke in the tournament, then you'll win the bet as well.
And where are you getting most of your information for the golf information?
So the website I stumbled across this year is called datagolf.com, and they have a paywall as well, but there is a lot of free information on there. You can look at course history and course fits. They have strokes gained data from the last 5+ years on all of these golfers. So you can go in and look at, in particular, the courses, the stadium course that's going to be played twice this weekend. You can look and see how each one of the golfers has fared on that exact course in their history.
Nice. So I think that's the advantage. If you're willing to take the time to look at that data, it's not as, I guess, there is actually pretty good volume. There's a lot of people betting on golf, but it seems to me that people who take the time like yourself or doing some research, you have an advantage where I think, as we've noted in the NFL and highly bet sports, it's hard to hedge sometimes because everybody's got the same information. So it's challenging. So that's great. I'm glad you've get some winners here.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I said, hit an outright winner last week with Matsuyama, and hopefully can pick out a few more as the season progresses.
And you're out for that. You're doing your local, online books? Are you doing offshore? How are you betting those?
I look across all of them. There's several websites that you can look. Odds Trader comes to mind, and I think even the Action Network has a free odds page for golf as well. So does Data Golf. So you can look and really do your line shopping to make sure that if you're targeting a golfer, that you're playing it at the best odds.
Okay. Nice. Well, thank you, Action. There we go. We've diversified. We've gotten to the point where we're trying to offer your bankroll increase on all sports, not just the NFL and college basketball. Nice work. Okay, great. Well, look, that wraps us up this week, and it was a little bit longer episode because we did the preview of the college basketball, and we've got Wildcard, but next week we'll only have the championship round. We'll have 2 games to handicap in the NFL, so we'll do that. Plus, we'll do college basketball, maybe a little golf or something else that Action wants to sprinkle in. So hopefully you can win some money and do what we did this weekend and win some money like we did in Wildcard weekend. So We'll follow us at Side Action Pod on Twitter. Follow me at Wegspool on Twitter and Instagram.
And follow me on Twitter at 31sroberts.
All right. Good luck, everybody. Should be another great weekend.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Side Action Podcast. We appreciate all of your listens and thank you for joining us. We'll see you all again next week on Thursday for some more hot picks and side action. Side Action Podcast, its owners and associates take no responsibility for the opinions or statements made by the show hosts or their guests. Statements or show topics are not necessarily the beliefs of this podcast, and opinions between talk show hosts may conflict. Individuals following the advice given on the podcast accept their own risk of losses from wagers made, as the Side Action Podcast, its owners, hosts, associates, or guests will not guarantee any advice given. The opinions and advice given on the Side Action Podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Intro and outro and transition music credits. Song titles Jerry 5 and District 4 by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.org. Licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0. creativecommons.org/licenses/by 3.0.